Genesis House, FirstNet, built with AT&T, and the Friends in Recovery podcast are proud to bring you Answering the Call, the First Responders podcast. Join your hosts,
Podfather, Jersey Ed,
and Noontime with Skylar Noon,
as they address the real issues of first responders' health and wellness, from physical and mental health to relationships and work-life balance. Answering the Call, the First Responders podcast, is available on Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, and YouTube, as well as iHeartRadio, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, here are your friends in recovery answering the call.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Answering the Call, the First Responders podcast, sponsored by FirstNet, built by AT&T. I am the Podfather, Mike Miles, and I'm here with my close and good friends.
Jersey Ed, guys. Hey,
and
everybody.
It's Noontime with Sky. Hey, everyone.
Noontime with Sky. What's up,
Beautiful
Sky?
day.
Yes, it is.
Really nice.
It is. We got a special guest, guys, today, Stephanie Samules from the ultimate line that we've always been talking about, Copline.org.
And the guest.
Guys, we've been talking about this guest for a long time, and we're going to bring Stephanie on in a little bit. But this is like a long-awaited show. As everybody's been listening, they know that yeah, it is. It is. We're going to find out all about Copline. We're going to hear, a lot of good insights about it and, all that stuff. But we'll bring Stephanie on in a minute. But Podfather, I see you're in your car, and Sky, you got some cool backgrounds going on. And
I'm leveling up.
A couple of months ago, or maybe several months ago, we did a podcast from my car. I had a flat tire.
Yes.
And believe it or not, last night driving home from my office, I had a nail in my tire. And
oh, no.
I pulled it out. Yep. And guess what? Another
flat tire. So podcasts from the car are not good. So, but he's smoking a cigar over there. He's retired. What more in life can you ask for, Podfather?
Not much.
Well, you know what we could ask for, Podfather? We could ask for people to call us at 617-379-1163. That's our phone number to get a hold of us. That is not a hotline or a helpline, guys. This is just a line to call in about a guest, or if you have some questions for the Podfather or whatever you want to, as far as anything goes, or else you can email us at help@friendsandrecoverypodcast.com. That's help@friendsandrecoverypodcast.com. That's a way you can get a hold of us. Again, that phone number is not a helpline. The helpline is the 1-800-COP-LINE. And Stephanie Samules is our guest today to tell us all about that. Before I bring Stephanie on, I want to read a quick paragraph about her bio. Stephanie Samules is a psychotherapist who works exclusively with police officers in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Oklahoma. Ms. Samuels has lectured all over the country on PTSD and trauma, including undiagnosed PTSD and the fallout from departmental silence after officers are involved in critical incidences. Stephanie Samuels, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. It's really an honor to be on here with you guys.
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, say it again, Podfather.
I know. I just said it's so nice having her on.
I know. Well, Stephanie, I have to tell you, we have been talking about your way before the new year, because you and I spoke before the new year. You were asking me to promote your run, and we did on here. And I asked if I can use your phone number, your Copline, 1-800-COP-LINE to put out there. Yeah, absolutely. So ever since probably the beginning of December, we've been talking about Copline, and we have been waiting for this show. Right, guys? Haven't we been waiting for this show as long as we've been promoting Copline, right?
100%.
Thank you.
And I'll
Each
even
week
tell
it
you,
was like 2 more weeks.
I know.
Countdown.
I know. Yeah, it was good. So absolutely. And the one thing that, and I'll have you explain a little bit who you are and what you do as far as Copline goes and how it all started. But the one thing that Podfather, I love how when we do talk about suicide on here, we talk about hard times, good times, all that. But Podfather will always say, Ed, if we talk about something rough, he would say, Ed, please give that phone number out, that 1-800-COP-LINE number. And we always do. We always, in the middle of a show, we'll give it out. And talking about something rough on here that might trigger somebody or think about something, we give your phone number out. And it's just amazing. So instead of me trying to figure out what it is and going through everything, why don't you tell us a little bit about 1-800-COP-LINE and Copline.org, Steph?
Sure. So thank you again. So Copline's pretty simple. It's exactly, when retired officers want to volunteer, I always say to them, I said, you know how you've gone to trainings like your entire career and you sign up for something and you think you're going to get one thing and you never end up, it's never exactly what you think. I'm like, Copline is exactly what you think. So I think that's the greatest surprise. So it is retired, vetted officers that have been trained and gone through extensive training. They also are required to do in-service training 4 times a year with us to answer these lines. And the lines are there for all different psychosocial stressors. So from the bad day phone call, just, kind of frazzled, certainly with what's going on in society, and, lost a Capitol Police officer yesterday,
Yes,
just
yeah.
devastating.
Yeah.
To that full-blown mental health crisis, because it's really important what I've watched. So I've been a clinician for 32, 33 years. That's just worked with law enforcement. And, what I've seen is by the time they get in to see me, they should have been there 10 years ago. That it is truly the cumulative effects of life. They come on the job, they are resilient typically from a history. So a typical profile of a cop goes like this: somebody who has grown up in crisis, does well in crisis, doesn't know how to live without crisis, issues with a father figure, significant loss early in life, history of abuse, emotional, physical, sexual, or neglect. Makes for a good cop, makes for a difficult home life.
Mm.
So, but damn it, it also has given them their resiliency.
Mm.
They have survived every worst day of their life up until this very moment.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to pull from that. So when we go through the training with retired officers, they truly end up getting far more than they bargained for. The lines are exactly what they are. But for our retired officers, the challenge is I understand, and our trainers understand what the profile is, what the amazing profile is. And most of the time, nobody's ever addressed that. So as they go through the training, as they go through role plays, they're really challenged. But I will tell you, there is nothing that I haven't just mentioned that we have not had to field on those phones. So whether it be an officer who has gone to a scene where a child has been molested, that for the first time that officer has called an anonymous line to talk about what it was like for them and to disclose that they had been molested. So being able to provide a line that can deal with truly anything, because the belief is if we can grab them with low-hanging fruit,
Mm-hmm.
when it's time for the high-hanging fruit and they've had a really good experience, they'll call back.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, they do.
Mm-hmm.
So we know we're doing something right.
Mm-hmm.
So Copline came out of years when I was in high school. I had been a founding teen on a teen line, because teens only talk to teens, because we know that adults are stupid. So we were able to, so it was a simple concept back then, and was able to be in that first focus group and did that from the time I started when I was 14. By the time we got on lines or whatever, I was 16, and then you want to talk about what's like. So I had aged out pretty quickly because I was no longer a teen. I think, Jesus, there goes that life. So, so that was over 40 years ago. So I stayed in touch actually with the woman who had created it, Dr. Elaine Leader. Mm-hmm. So I started riding with cops. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a police officer. It was back in the 80s. I was in Los Angeles. I had grown up out there.
Oh, wow.
For the formative years, just enough time to get into some serious trouble.
That was the Rodney King years, actually.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and LAPD had formed their gang detail unit back then. So that had kind of really interested me. And at some point in time, I realized I did a lot of ride-alongs. I didn't know if I could do it. I honestly didn't know, not physically, but psychologically. I didn't know if I had what it took. So I ended up moving back east, kind of, and then ended up in the police academy out in Monmouth County where I live. And I said, director then, I said, I was wondering, who does your debriefings and, for officers involved in critical incidents, untimely deaths, blah, blah, blah. And he looked at me like I had two heads. And then kind of, figured I might be speaking LAEs because that's a whole different language out on the left side of the country. And finally, he said, nobody. So I started lecturing. So he gave me 2 hours. We had just had a suicide in Monmouth County. And I went up to the director and I said, how many more deaths is it going to take until you start talking about this? So he gave me 2 hours the last day of that recruit class. You can imagine how excited they were to hear me. And
at the last 2 hours too.
And talking about suicide. So what grew out of that was then, 20 hours of being able to deal with recruits. And that was just incredibly beneficial and helped me understand. But I started doing a lot of ride-alongs, and we're going to talk about cultural competent therapists. And I am a firm believer that if you're going to work with law enforcement, your ass better be in a police car at some point in time. And I don't mean for the convenient 2 hours, between picking up kids, making dinner, doing, I don't care. And I know that's really, sexist, and I'll probably get slammed for that. But it's about taking the uncomfortable shifts. Like I remember taking a midnight shift. First of all, the guy freaked out because he's like, are you kidding me? This bitch is staying with me for 12 hours because he was on a pit.
You won't get a chance to sleep.
Yeah. And I finally said to him, I go, listen, it's okay if you coop. And he looked at me and he's like, I got it. But I remember getting off the shift and not knowing whether or not I should eat, sleep, or shit. So I finally took a bowl of Raisin Bran into the bathroom, figured I could knock 2 out of 3 off, and pray that I didn't fall asleep on the toilet. It was just important to be able to understand. And so when I first started doing that, I had come from LAPD, riding with them and Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, just amazing individuals, to Avon by the Sea, dead of winter. And they had talked to, they're like, oh, you're going to be bored. You know what? People don't realize that in these small towns, the emotionally charged incidents is every call, because Los Angeles is too big. They're not patrolling their own hometowns. When you get into these small towns, every single call is one that you can't build that armor. It's not John Doe or Jane Doe. It's Aunt Sally's neighbor that I grew up with. So that kind of emotional protection that officers need is really gone when they go. So I learned so much. And then I took this concept and I thought, you know what? They need to be able to talk to somebody. And I thought, well, what happens if, because what I was seeing, and then started seeing in my own practice, is I was retiring officers early due to post-traumatic stress disorder. And yet they took with them a wealth of knowledge, a compassion and understanding that they would never have had otherwise if they hadn't been involved in this, and it was going to be lost. So that's so the concept was born as a teenager, executed with teens, and then really was honed in on law enforcement. And I get asked all the time, why retired officers? Sometimes I get some angry active officers saying, I don't understand why I was excluded. So I want to get that out there, that the reason why they have to be retired officers is because sworn officers have a duty to do something if a caller calls and they're engaged in illegal activity, whether it is substance abuse, whether it is domestic violence, that they have to do something, whereas a retired officer is not required to do so. And Copline needed to be able to be set up so that officers can talk about really anything without fear of them having been so courageous to dial 10 numbers, and that became the mistake that cost them everything. So, when officers call the line, so the other question has been, we are the only truly confidential hotline. If people say confidential, I task everybody that listens to your show to vet hotlines. I always say to them, call Copline. I'm the damn founder and director. Don't listen to me. I'm not going to talk shit about it. Call it yourself.
Yeah.
But talk about confidentiality, because every line that I am aware of that a police officer calls is going to have that phone pinged and traced if they talk about if they're suicidal. And we know that 1 out of 8 officers thinks about suicide. So a common question. So why should we be this gatekeeper for what appears to be truly a common thought, but we don't allow anybody to talk about it? And that's why they don't. They're, if I talk about this, I'm going to lose everything.
Yes. Yeah. That's the problem. You call some of these lines and you talk about suicide, man, there's somebody at your door almost, and
who shows up at the door?
The cop, your brother, your sister.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the good of the one could not outweigh the good of the many. So you send a cop to the cop's door, and the cop goes back to the department and says, hey, I just showed up at Ed's door. He's done. Never call that hotline. So now everybody in his department knows. So I've now contaminated that entire group. So Copline, so we made sure, and one of the ways that we made sure has made it difficult for funding, but I can look any officer in the eyes and tell them that there is no fear. We don't take any government money. So there's no state funding, there's no federal money. So that the integrity of these lines can be maintained. You guys haven't spent your careers building what you have to lose it because you've asked for help. That's your fear. So, and our officers, that's difficult. A lot of our guys are religious. And, when we vet, I need to say to them, how are you going to feel if you have an officer on the other line that's suicidal? So here's what we know. So the Los Angeles Suicide Prevention Center is the oldest hotline in the United States. It's been around since 1963.
Wow.
They have fielded over 7,500,000 calls up to 2019 is when I could get the stats up until.
This is for cops or this is for civilians?
Nope, civilians. So oldest hotline, only suicide. So it is a suicide hotline. It is not, like Copline, but, so it'll advertise only for suicide prevention. So they have fielded over 7,500,000 calls, of which 2 have died by suicide on those lines.
So out of 7 million calls,
7,500,000 calls, 2 have died by suicide on the lines.
Wow.
So what we know is that people that call hotlines don't typically call to die by suicide on those lines. They call to talk.
Yes.
So I sure as hell wasn't going to breach. So when we vet and we talk to them, we explain this to them, because if they're uncomfortable, and you know what, never had anybody as religious as some of our retirees are, that has been a conflict because they understand it. And we know that officers, the hardest thing was to train giving advice out of an officer. And I'm not sure we trained it out of them, but boy, we hold them to task in those ways. So when you get somebody on the line that's suicidal, a lot of our listeners are past hostage negotiators,
Mm.
past peer support.
Listeners being the volunteers.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Because that just seems to be who's drawn.
Yeah, I like listeners. That's great. That is such a great, a volunteer or an expert. I don't need I need somebody that's going to fucking listen to me. I love that, Steph. I love that.
So I'll tell you, if you haven't ever seen Kevin Briggs, what is he on TED Talk? It's a 15-minute TED Talk. He was California Highway Patrol officer who worked for 16 years on the Golden Gate Bridge, talking people out of suicide. And one of the things that has absolutely ruminated since I have watched it is he spent hours talking to somebody who then climbed back over, and he said to that person, "What did I say?" I have goosebumps. And he said, "It wasn't what you said. You listened." The power of listening is so key. But listening requires you to connect to another human being. Cops have guarded against that connection.
That is true. Yes.
So being able to sit in that hole and to be able to say to you, "Brother, I can't imagine what this is like, but I feel how absolutely overwhelmed and helpless you are. You are not alone. Tell me what's going on. Tell me what else in your life you've got." And when it comes to suicide, most people have in their back pocket, what about your wife? You find out they have a wife, they have kids, and they start using that. What we call those anchors.
They make them human, right? They're like, we're human. Because usually when you're calling suicide, you have this blank look. You don't want to be part of the human race anymore. And it sounds like you make them human again. I don't know if that's the right term for it, but
so many times what we found is that those that are thinking of killing themselves have thought about their loved ones and truly believe that they will be better off without them. So I'm not going to get into, and we train, this isn't a pissing contest. This is about being able to say to them, "I can't imagine the pain that you're in, that you don't want to be here anymore. What would it be like for you not to kill yourself just for the next 5 minutes while we talk?"
Wow, that's heavy.
Giving them permission. One of the things that I know for me makes it so important for me to stay alive is the knowledge that I can take myself out, because it means that I have control over my life. So after they call the hotline, it's so important to give them back control, because officers need to be in control. They need to be able to understand that reaching out is normal, and that we're not looking down, that we're going to let them stay in the driver's seat. If it's time for me to just take over because they're a little tired or whatever, I'm going to take over for just that time, but I'm giving them back that driver's seat. I'm not taking away their driver's license.
It's okay not to be okay, right? Is that what you're really telling them?
Exactly. And it's okay to think about killing yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Natural. Yeah, it's a natural thing. People don't really understand.
Yeah.
And most cops that come see me, when I ask them on my 8-page evaluation if they've thought of suicide ideation, they're sometimes apprehensive. Sometimes they break down and say, "Yeah, 100%, always thinking about it." And then when they understand that someone's actually asking them, "Have you thought of killing yourself? How many times? Well, do you have a method?" All of a sudden you're speaking their language. They understand. They feel comfortable and relaxed. Hey, I think we're going to take a break here, Ed.
Yeah, we're going to take a break, Steph, and when we come back, we're going to get more into the Copline. You tell us. I want to find out. Maybe we could talk about some calls. What kind of calls we get on the Copline and all that stuff. So,
Absolutely.
Podfather, you want to
Yep.
take us out here?
Yeah, sorry. Wrong podcast. Answering the call, the First Responders podcast, sponsored by FirstNet, built by AT&T. I am the Podfather. We'll be right back.
You're first. First to respond. First to put others' lives before your own. And in an emergency, you need a network that puts you first. That connects you to technology, to each other, and to other agencies. Built with and for first responders. FirstNet, the only congressionally authorized wireless network for first responders. Because putting you first is our job.
Since 1992, Genesis House has been helping real people heal from addiction on their private recovery campus in beautiful Palm Beach County, Florida. Their family-owned program is accredited by the Joint Commission and offers detox and dual diagnosis treatment in a comfortable and confidential setting. At Genesis House, they focus on treating the underlying causes of addiction. Their comprehensive approach includes psychiatric care, individual and small group therapy, trauma healing techniques, and holistic care including yoga, massage, and animal-assisted therapy. After treatment, their clients enjoy the lifelong support of a nationwide network of Genesis House alumni. Call Genesis House today at 1-800-737-0933 to speak with someone who understands. Visit them on the web at www.genesishouse.net. It's time to start your journey to a long and successful recovery.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Answering the Call, the First Responders podcast, sponsored by FirstNet, built by AT&T. I am the Podfather, and I'm here with my close friends, Jersey Ed.
Oh, Jersey Ed. You're talking to me, Jersey Ed. I'm like, wait, am I his close friend? I guess I am. Hey guys, Jersey Ed. And
It's Noontime with Sky.
this guy and our special guest today is Stephanie Samules, and we were just talking about the Copline and what was going on and some of the police officers that the retired police officers. It's fascinating that you have the retired police officers there, and because of that reason, because they're not obligated to what regular police officers are. I was just writing some things down here, Steph, and a couple of things that stood out. Important to understand cops. That was what you said that you had to do. It's important to understand cops. That's the first time I heard that from a civilian, and especially, well, not the first time, but a civilian who's working very closely with cops. That is so key to understand a police officer, especially if you're going to do what you're doing from the Copline perspective. You have to definitely get to know them as far as that goes.
Right. And yeah, when anybody calls Copline, like, you'll never get me.
Mhm.
Matter of fact, if you want to see me, you can't call Copline because my bylaws make it clear that under no circumstances can I ever profit. So
Mhm.
I'm not on my own referral list.
Yeah.
Anybody that's on Copline's referral list is culturally competent.
Mhm.
That has been vetted by us, and us typically is either a clinician and a retired officer, or just a retired officer.
Mhm.
So
I just want to say how important that is. All right.
Yep.
I am a clinician and I am a retired officer, 35 years, 8 years as the employee assistance professional, helping police officers and their family in the city of Lowell and surrounding cities and towns, because there's not enough therapists out there that cops feel comfortable going to. So
Mhm.
I was inundated. I still am inundated. I get calls every day. I guarantee you, I've gotten 2 messages this morning. I know exactly who it's from. But your training, your training and your program is so, I don't know, it's just right there. Talking about LA, when you were talking about LA, everything trickles from LA out to the East Coast. Do you know I watch Adam 12 now that I'm an old man, 5 to 6 p.m. every night if I'm home, and I love it. But you know why I watch it? Not just because of Officer Reed and Malloy and all their great, but they were those actors, and that whole show was based on the standard operating procedure of the LAPD. Every call they go on, every call they take over the air, everything they do is exactly how they naturally do it. And other departments have learned from LAPD.
Wow.
It
Wow.
eventually comes this way.
Yeah.
We didn't have a program in the city the size of Lowell, 250 police officers until the 90s, where you could actually go speak to somebody with your problems and feel comfortable that it wasn't some social worker right out of a very, very liberal college who is eating salad with her fingers and saying, "Oh my God, you brought a gun, you have a gun on, Yeah, of course you have a gun, I'm working, I come to you while I'm working." So I'm listening to you, and I swear you're speaking my language, and I guarantee you there are cities and towns in this area that still are in the dark ages when it comes to critical incidents and debriefings and defusings.
So so our lead trainer is with the Los Angeles Police Department. So he has a dual expertise. He was the director of the Los Angeles Suicide Hotline. So he comes from the oldest hotline and knows hotline work.
Awesome.
And now is with the Los Angeles Police Department in their behavioral science services. So I am not lead trainer. I actually take my slice of pie is post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what I'm an expert in and lecture. So they're just the different components, but the training cadre is amazing. So that was one of the things, and I'm going to touch on, and I always hesitate, but I feel it is important. As a clinician, in particularly the times that we're going through, the political climate for officers to be able to talk about their frustrations, the concerns about walking into a therapist's office that they know predominantly the field is liberal is a huge concern. So I remember one of the guys was involved in a shooting. He ended up getting referred to me, and he came in and he tells the story all the time. He says, "I'm figuring I'm walking into some flaming liberal who's going to make me stand up and do kumbaya. Instead, I get a middle-aged, foul-mouthed woman who is a lifetime member of the NRA. It's like, it's a fucking win." So,
what more can you ask for, right?
but that is so important. And I'm sorry that viewpoints absolutely come into play when you work with law enforcement, period. And it's not about being racist. I mean, somehow or another, being conservative became, synonymous with being a racist or what have you. Absolutely not the case, as we know. But I know when officers walk in and they see what's in my office, they know that they're sitting with a friendly. And that is imperative. So thank you, Mike, for bringing that up. And
so important.
It's so important. And when we refer, we need to make sure of that, because when you walk in and they've got, political pictures up, and signs of Black Lives Matter, listen, and that it becomes racist to say all lives matter. Like you can't do that. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Right.
So that is so important. And, I know that you had touched on, and I wanted to address kind of what kind of calls that Copline gets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think it's important for people to realize that they are bad day calls. So 96% of our calls are bad day calls. Just shit that's gone on at work, at home, bad day calls. And 3 to 3.5% are critical incidents, officers involved in OISs, child-related incidents, and on and off the job, cancer with a loved one, DUIs with themselves. So those are crisis calls. And then you get that 0.5% to that 1% that we lovingly refer to as they are the calls that make your ass pucker. They are the officer that is crying on the phone, that has a firearm typically in their lap, who has just said that they cannot go on. And so they're not mine, although I feel like they're all mine.
It's your baby. Come on, it is.
But they're just amazing. I think they take better care of me than I take care of them. So the listeners, they have been so well trained to deal with this entire gamut of calls. And one of the things when we are vetted, and particularly I am vetted for Copline, is, well, if you don't ping phones and you don't send rescue, then how do you deal with a suicidal officer?
Yep.
So, because we certainly have no desire to bear witness, but we will bear witness to pain. So it's being able to train in active listening, being able to let them know that they're never alone. And again, as you heard me say, I stay in the front seat, and those volunteers are in the front seat. So when they're not doing well, if they need to take that wheel for that moment, to be able to say to the person that's calling as time goes on, because rapport building is key. Just because you've dialed Copline, you guys know COP's not the most trusting group in America.
No.
So, they're doing their own checking whether or not they're really a retired officer. And they're not aggressively, they're not assholes being like, what department did you work for? What rank? It's that subtle kind of stuff that they talk about. And don't forget, we're covering a nation. So 10 codes are not necessarily throughout the United States. And 10 codes, even in New Jersey, vary. So we've had to train our retirees to not assume like a pit maneuver here is a tap maneuver in Oklahoma. So being able to say to our retirees, I'm not familiar with a tap maneuver. Can you please explain that? And as they start to be able to, and now they're thinking, oh my God, if I say that, they're going to think I'm not a cop.
Yeah.
For them to be able to say, where I patrolled, we call that a pit maneuver.
Okay.
Blah, blah, blah. So it's being able to connect. So, what's a 10-8? Well, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. A 10-8 where I patrolled meant that, I was clear. What does it mean? No, it means, officer needs assistance. So you just want to make sure. And we find that really connects them. It's not that because we know that we have retired officers on the other end. So all they have to do is be them, and they connect, and they're not calling a line to be abusive. They want to connect. So it's done kind of very flawlessly, seamlessly, and that connection gets built, and then rapport. And at some point in time, the listener will say, I can hear the amount of pain you're in, who's home, and kind of surveying, Mike, kind of like, would you talk about that suicide assessment? And we don't have the value of being able to see them. So, we also ask, where are you? And one of the calls that we took was a officer that seemed to be doing fine. Listener said, I'm wondering where you are. He was in the woods. And he said, is anybody there with you? And he said, no. And he said, where's your firearm? And he said, on my lap, because I'm going to kill myself. And it's just, and that listener said, there was nothing in the world that made him believe from listening and what have you, except the skill set that is taught on these lines to make sure that we ask kind of what's going on. Give me your eyes and ears. Tell me what you see. Tell me what you hear. Just like you guys are on patrol. You keep your windows cracked open the dead of winter, so I learned to always bring sweatshirts.
File's laughing. He knows.
Cracking me up.
So, can you roll the window up for the invader was not really an ideal thing. Because you need to hear what's going on, the difference between fire and police. You guys are sniffing that perimeter. That's what our listeners are trained to do, but we need to do it with the help of that caller. And so once that rapport is built, once we understand where the person is, and then we say, I can hear how alone you are. I'm wondering, is there anybody else that you're close to that you thought about reaching out to? And I'm also wondering what prevented you from doing that. So there are times when they'll say, no, there's no one. And to say, that really, really feels so alone. I'm so glad I'm on the phone with you. So, and if they say, my buddy Mike, and you say, did you tell Mike that you're really struggling with the divorce? Well, Mike's got his own shit too. He's got a sick kid. I don't want to burden him. Say, how do you know Mike has a sick kid? Well, he told me. Does Mike know you're going through a divorce? Oh yeah, everybody knows I'm going through a divorce. Well, then if everybody knows that, I bet you it didn't feel like a burden for you to hear about his sick kid. No, of course not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm wondering if he would feel the same way about you, that you're struggling with a divorce.
Oh.
Yeah, but
Now, will you get Mike on the line to talk to them, or is that something? Is that an option?
But we will
Okay.
say to that caller, how do you feel while you're on the phone with me? Because I want to stay connected to you. How would you feel about throwing Mike a text right now, or even adding him to our call?
Okay.
And that's where the success has been.
Wow.
And they end up doing that. So you go from the most lethal, and you're able to kind of open up the lens, because suicide is telephoto. All they see is the CCTV.
Yes.
So being able to get them to a wider angle, a little bit of periphery, is what we're going to do.
Brings them out of it.
And what we're going to do is we're going to sit with them. And while we sit with them, even if you say nothing, you're still going to watch that telephoto expand. So,
wow.
So those are, like I said, those are your 0.5% to 1%.
Now, how many calls do you get a month, Steph?
So last month I think we fielded 256. I think that's what came through.
Wow.
For our stats. We have had all 50 states and Canada call.
Wow.
There are different provinces up in Canada, but we've been able to touch on quite a few of those provinces as well.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
We also get third-party calls.
Okay.
Listening, Stephanie, it's Mike. Listening to you, and in my I had a long career. I was very fortunate. I stayed healthy, and I enjoyed my career. I loved it. I left 4 years before I could have, but I was 61. I'm like, hey, the last thing anybody wants to see is an old cop climbing upstairs, and it just doesn't look, But I had the opportunity twice in the last 10 years to talk, maybe 12 years, to talk somebody out of suicide. I had a drug dealer in a window. He was in a window jam, second story. Detectives outside, detectives in the hall. He's sitting in the window jam with a 38 to his head. And they call. I was working a detail with this officer, Mickey O'Keefe, who was in the movie The Fighter. He played himself. Mark Wahlberg played Mickey Ward. Anyway, Mickey O'Keefe is well known. Everyone knows him, loves him. So we were working together in a detail, and they called me to the scene to see if I could talk this guy out of shooting himself. And what I did was I kind of stuck my head around the corner. He was yelling, screaming, swearing, didn't want nothing to do with me. Get the fuck away from me. And I just said, hey, do you have children? I must have asked him 3 or 4 times. Finally, he goes, what fucking difference does it make? I said, well, I just want you to know that if you kill yourself, that they are going to, have a 30% higher rate of possibility of doing the same thing. Maybe not with a gun, but they're going to have their own problems down the road. And they're going to think, well, my dad killed himself. I guess this was my, inheritance. I have to do this. And that worked. Put the gun down. He was arrested. Obviously, he got caught with all his drugs. But other cops come up to me afterwards, which really impressed me, 2 of them. And one of them was he almost went to the pros and the NFL. And he said, Miles, is that true? Is that what you said? Is it true? I said, yeah, it's a fact, And he said, wow, it really made me think. But my point is this. I'm not saying he was thinking of it, but I guarantee you that any cop that was there heard that. And you know what? It kind of resonated. And it's so, I'm listening to you, and I wish there was 100 like you. Stephanie, you're amazing. What you're doing is amazing.
Yeah.
Boy, I'll tell you, this is good stuff.
Well,
I love that it's like kind of squashing the stigma. And I say that because you're exposing the light into it. Because if you're saying 1 in 8 cop, the police officers this can be happen to, right? Then if there any, like for me, when I ran into being an addict, right? 1 in so many is going to be an addict. I still didn't like that it was me. So that's why I probably sat there for 10 years and didn't reach out either. So I mean, like if it's saying, hey, I identify, you're not alone, and we're here to help. Like, let's squash the stigma. And that's kind of what we do with addiction too, is we keep trying to squash the stigma by exposing it and telling it for what it really is. It's common to feel that way. It's okay to have those thoughts, and we're here to listen, and we're not going to report you. Like that's to me, that's everything about squashing a stigma, and that's the way to the homeland right there, right? You know.
And the 1 out of 8 is think about suicide, not complete suicide. But the commonality of thoughts. I mean, of just that ceasing of pain, that fantasy of going to sleep and waking up and everything's better.
No pain, no nothing. Yeah. Steph, you made a point in a prior conversation with us before, is that we need to shed light on this. And like Skylar said, we need to squash the stigma. And that's something that Copline's doing, that you guys want to, it's okay to talk about it. It's okay. Let's talk about suicide. And it's funny. Yeah, exactly. It's funny because on some of the past shows, if you listen to what I was saying, I would say, well, if you have a problem, you have this. And I was kind of tiptoeing around it. And you quite frankly made it, you have to say suicide. Are you thinking of suicide? It's not a joke. Let's talk about it, and let's
so we had a call with an individual. He was on his way home. He was driving, and he was talking to the listener, and he said, I was going over a bridge and I just wanted to drive off the bridge and be done. And then he continued to talk, and our listener listened. And our listener, he's probably about 5 minutes into the conversation, and he said, you know, Bob, I want to go back to something you said. I was wondering, how long have you thought about killing yourself for? And there was silence on the phone, and Bob said, thank you for asking.
Wow.
I mean, we couldn't have set up a better phone call for training purposes, but it gave him permission to talk about a depth of feeling that everybody else kind of stayed away from. You guys are cops. Ask the fucking question you want the answer to.
Yes.
I do not care if you are thinking of hurting yourself. I want to know if you're thinking of killing yourself. Being direct. I love cops that say to me, you're so direct, Steph, you're so direct. Then why the fuck can't you be direct?
Yeah.
Because you've somehow or another made it not okay to talk about something, but you're more okay showing up to their funeral? Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. Because if you don't ask the question, here's what you get left with. Should have, could have, and would have. The 3 things that jam you up in your career and your life.
Yeah.
Go ahead, just real quick. I really think it's so important for anybody listening to our podcast, fire, police, EMS, anybody in this profession right now, but specifically cops, because you have the means, you have that sidearm, that firearm, you have it with you all the time.
Yes.
Some cops never carried a gun or even shot a gun before they became a police officer. You know, my generation, a lot of us were veterans. I was in the military police. You know, we did all this. But my point is, when you try to, hurt yourself, or you're thinking about hurting yourself, and it gets out. In other words, one of your friends or your wife or your girlfriend calls the station and lets them know that you've talked about suicide. Well, then it's a different ball game, because now you're going to be scrutinized. You're going to have to turn in all your weapons. You're going to be watched. But in this case, you get to vent, get some professional help.
Yeah.
In the sense that you're speaking to somebody who's been trained. Stephanie, I love when you speak in my language when you said, we have 4 in service 4 times a year. That's every cop's nightmare. Who wants to take a week off to go do the same shit I did last year? And I did great, and listen to somebody who was uninterested. And, these are professionals, I used Copline yesterday, believe it or not. I had a police officer with some problems, and I said, you know what? You don't have to be talking suicide. You have a lot going on. I want you, and this is a very high-end cop, I want you to call this number. And I pulled over and I looked up the exact number for Copline, 1-800-Copline. I have it written down here on a piece of paper, and I gave it to him. And I haven't heard back from him. He's going to call me at 12 today. But
Good.
I just think any cop calling or listening to the show, you know what, spread this, because this is a gift.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, and what you just said, if a girlfriend called the station, you could get in trouble. But if a family member called you and reached out to Copline, that would, so that could be an option for the family members to reach out to, like to get help.
That's
Yeah.
We also encourage them so that if the family member calls and says, well, what happens if my husband doesn't call, is to be able to say, you can put us on speaker. You can do the calling and just put us on speaker.
Yeah.
So that they can listen. And that has been done enough times. And then all of a sudden, at some point, the cop takes over.
Yeah, the cop in him comes out.
Well,
All I
because
know-
they realize they're not full of shit.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly.
And if I was a loved one of a police officer or somebody who stated they wanted to kill themselves and they had the means, I wouldn't sleep a wink until they were well, until they got help, until something. I would not feel comfortable at all, ever. So I can only imagine what family members, wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, significant others must feel like when somebody blurts out, I want to fucking kill myself.
Yeah.
Boom. Now, it's stress city the rest of your life until you get that person help.
We had, one call was beautiful. It was a young officer who called, who was on his way home. He had a bad day at work and he called the hotline. He was going home to his fiance. They were getting married in a couple weeks. And he called the hotline and he said, I notice I'm more on edge. I notice that when I go home, I'm not as carefree as I used to be. And he said, what is the secret to staying married? And he asked the listener, he said, are you married and whatever? And the listener happened to have been married for, 30 some odd years. And as they were talking and he had arrived home and he said to the listener, I feel so much better. And the listener said, you figured it out. Said, what? He said, if you can talk about it, if you can understand that you're having a bad day and you can get it out, you can be home and enjoy those moments. And he said, if I'm having a bad day every time I'm going home, and the listener interrupted and said, you can call us every time you've had a bad day.
Exactly.
And you just feel like that's what makes your heart dance. Because we know that rookie will now use these lines for the rest of his career.
And the key to that, Steph, and it's just amazing that listener said that to him, is because when in any situation, we're not going to be right here in a year from now, a day from now, a week from now, 10 minutes from now. We're not going to be right here. The way we're feeling, the way we're acting, the way we're thinking, our thoughts are going to change. So if we can get somebody on the other line, especially a cop on the other line, to change our thought, to change our mind a little bit, we come out of whatever that is, being suicide or a bad day, kicking a dog, pissed off at the chief, whatever it is, it changes your thought immediately and you're put into a better space. And that's what Copline does.
And
day at a time. Next day could be a whole new ball game.
Yeah.
I mean, and with what's going on in society right now, being able to have a line to talk about the administration, they have been betrayed on all levels now.
100%.
It's the administration. It is their leadership. It is the politics. It is society, people that love them. And being able to talk to retirees that have gone through LA riots, that have gone through Chicago riots, that have gone through different scenarios.
Ferguson, Missouri. Yep. All
of society, and can just, again, sit with them.
Right.
And be able to just kind of be there. And what you guys are doing is phenomenal. Being able to make sure that you have guests on to just help whoever you can know what's going on. I mean, Mike, for you picking up this career after, doing a full career, and Sky, you giving up, and paying forward for what you've been through, bless your heart. And Ed, you as well. I mean, you are vigilant in making sure that people know about recovery. that there are safe places for officers and first responders to go to be able to be in recovery.
Thank you. Yeah.
And that's what it's about. We all need to just do our part and stay in our damn lanes. This isn't about ego. When I watch people, jockeying and, they're beating their chest, and I'm like, I don't know. We keep having fucking suicide. So I'm not sure that anybody's doing such a great goddamn job.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly.
That kind of eliminates that.
Exactly. Steph, real quick before we're almost out of time here, but I purposely left off the our little spiel after the after a break. I usually give out the Copline or the copline.org and the 1-800-Copline, because I want you to talk about that. I want you to give us we know the inside of it and how it operates. I want to know from the outside, how can they get a hold of you? What's the phone number? What do they do? And all that. Yeah. A little commercial, basically.
Okay. So Copline is simple. It's 1-800-Copline, which is 267-5463. Again, 1-800-Copline. And you can access us as well through the web. And our email address is, for me, I'm director@copline.org, but you can go online and we are www.copline. I can tell you .org, but we have all of them. We're .org, .com, .net, just
goes over
Copline.
Yeah.
And if you're a retired officer listening to this and you're interested in volunteering, we'd love to have volunteers. So go on the website, please, www.copline.org. And there is a section that says volunteer. So please fill out that form. If you are a mental health provider, we have a form for you to fill out as well on there. So by all means, we have 3 more trainings coming up. I think Los Angeles is full. Los Angeles is April 21st through the 25th. We have our first training in New Jersey on May the 12th through May the 16th. Unity Tour was canceled. They've moved that to October, so it does not interfere. And then at the end of the year in October, we're back out in the Sacramento area from October the 6th through the 10th. So we've got the 3. Again, we have a little over 100 volunteers. The requirement is only 1 shift a month for 12 hours. Wow. And you pick the shift.
Wow.
It is done through phone, so that as long as you're in an area that your cell phone is available, so you don't have to go to any centralized location or what have you.
Nice.
So by all means, we'd love to have volunteers.
Yeah. Pick up that, get on that website and fill out those forms. We need cops, retired cops like the Podfather and all these guys who do this, please do that. Yeah.
Stephanie, from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you. This is the best podcast I've done in over 3 years for 2 years for doing Answering the Call. And can't thank you enough.
Yeah, Stephanie, thank you. And you gave us all a pat on the back for everything we do, but Stephanie, and I know you don't like this because you and I talk, but this is an amazing thing that you put together. This is just unbelievable that I know you're like, yeah, it's not me. It's not. Yeah, it's you. 100% it's you. Because without you starting this, these volunteers wouldn't have a place to go. Without you starting this, these people who are calling these volunteers wouldn't have this. It's a vision that you have, but it's a helpline for people who need to come in. So thank you from the bottom of our heart. And I have to agree with the Podfather. This is probably one of the best, answering the call that I've done in the 2 years that we've been doing this. So.
Thank you, Stephanie. You guys are a gift. Thank you very much. Thank you. Be safe, please.
Yep, absolutely. Podfather, I don't even know what to say after her whole thing here. I have nothing left. I mean, you want to take us out here?
Yeah, absolutely. Just one last thing. I mean, I think I mentioned it before. She looks like Sandra Bullock. I can't help it.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
That's good. Coming back on.
Yeah. Really? You want to come back on? Really? Yeah. Really? Yeah, no, I know. We will have you back on, but not the next
You're
day.
Definitely coming back on. Hey, everybody. Answering the Call, the First Responders Podcast, sponsored by FirstNet, built by AT&T. Stay safe, everyone.
Stay safe, guys. Stephanie Samules, thank you, guys.
Great show.
That concludes this episode of Answering the Call, the First Responders Podcast. Thanks to Genesis House. FirstNet, built with AT&T, for supporting those on the path to recovery and keeping this valuable resource free for all our friends in recovery. Follow us on Facebook for past shows and updates, and enjoy free access to twice daily support meetings. Brought to you by Genesis House and the Friends in Recovery. If you can't get enough of Mike, the Podfather, Jersey Ed, and Skylar, you can catch them on Friends in Recovery, the Addiction Recovery Podcast. Available on Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and GenesisHouse.net.